Welcome to the Hourly Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of leaders who are shaping the future of work and organizational culture. I'm your host, AJ Rikiki, and in today's episode, we dive into the story of Jonathan Weathington, the CEO of Shuckin Shack here in the Carolinas. I had a great time speaking with Jonathan about his approach to hiring, his emphasis on culture, and treating every employee with respect and dignity. Enjoy. All right, we'll get started. Well, thanks again, Jonathan, for hopping on the show. I've been following your career on LinkedIn for the last few years, seen all the amazing growth that you've had personally, getting promoted to CEO, and as well as Shuckin Shack growing locations. So thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so bring us to the beginning. What got you into franchising, and why are you so passionate about it today?
Sure, I think like many people who end up in franchising, you may not do it purposefully, I think. And so for me, it was similar. The very first official job I ever had, I was actually working for a franchisee of PostNet, which is still around and kicking and doing well. And I kind of fell in love with the idea of small business at that point. I was 15. I was still catching rides to work and really saw how they had kind of a support system behind them. Of course, this is post-mortem report for me. I wasn't realizing these things at 15. I just wanted gas money and be able to eat at Burger King every weekend or something like that. But, thinking several years later, it was more of, wow, they had this great system behind them, branding. I've always been into branding, look and feel, kind of general, just general branding and brand vision and all of those things. And then on top of that, they got to run their business on a daily basis. They hired people, they created jobs in the community, and, they were profitable and I got to see them reap the rewards of that. And I did it first seasonally, and then it became not necessarily a full-time gig, but I was there every day after school, packaging boxes and running the cash register and things like that. So that's kind of what got me first into franchising. And then, fast forward several years, and I had finished grad school and gone to a big boy job, so to speak, and really didn't enjoy being a number in a system, I guess you could say. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I started my first business when I was 13, doing tutoring, and then did that again in the year that I took off in between undergrad and grad school, and did really well with it, actually. And knew that I wanted to either A, start my own business, or B, be a part of a business that launches. And so went off and worked in retail and worked in banking and did several other things. I've had just about every job you can think of. And I knew the guys that started Shuckin Shack, and I was working at a business a couple of doors down. I was a customer first. I saw the first summer it was open, saw them building it the summer prior, and just fell in love with the brand, the look, feel, authentic nature of the brand. And then they called me in early 2014 and said, at that point we had 2 locations, and said, we're thinking about franchising. We don't know where you fit or how you fit or even what we can pay you, but is that something that you're interested in helping us do? And I said, absolutely, I'd love to. And so I slept on Matt. He's one of the co-founders. I slept on his couch for almost a year until we saw that it was going to work, that it was a financially viable option. I mean, and that was kind of, the rest is history, I suppose.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of a saying. It's when you get asked to go on a rocket ship, you don't ask what seat, right?
Yeah, I use that phrase. I use the rocket ship phrase often, in kind of encouraging of people, whether it's within our own system or friends or whomever. And, we talk about the story, and I talk about others, and this is not just germane to me. This happens all the time.
Right.
You got to know when to grab on and where to grab on. And when you see it, sometimes, certainly, I think it's human nature to hesitate, but don't be afraid of it. Your rocket ship's going to come.
Yeah. No, I love that advice. And for those that don't know much about Shuckin Shack, tell us a little bit about it. Like, how many units is it? Is it restaurant? Sure. Is it retail? Like, for somebody who's never heard of it before.
Sure. So we're 18 units. We are a full service restaurant with full bar. And so we're kind of this casual coastal environment. Authentic is a word that we use a lot. And I mean, if you've seen any of my posts on LinkedIn and even on our website, we talk about authenticity a lot, meaning, for folks that aren't from the coast, that visit maybe once a year or once every other year, maybe twice a year at best on vacation, you can tell authenticity when you walk in. And since we're from the coast and kind of grew up near here, it's we've tried to repeat that everywhere we are, no matter how far inland we are.
Yeah, I love that. And talk to us because many of our listeners are thinking about staffing, hourly workers. How many employees roughly are in each location, and some of the
Sure.
positions that may be challenging for you to find right now in today's labor environment?
Sure. So I think the challenges have gotten, knock on wood, they aren't quite as bad as they were. I would say two
Okay.
and a half years ago, 3 years ago was about the fever pitch of difficulty in hiring and all of those things. And I think it caused everyone to reevaluate all their systems. As far as employees system wide, anywhere between 15 and 35 employees. And that includes part time and full time. You have
Yep.
some folks who may work one shift a week just for extra money. And then we have full timers and, of course, management staff. So system wide, we have just about 500 employees.
Got it. And you mentioned kind of during that tough time, and listen, we were all feeling it, right? Especially during the peak of COVID when unemployment rate was, believe it or not, 15%, and not many people are coming back to work. What are some things that you changed within your system to maybe move around resources or different recruiting tactics? Like, how did you react to it? And would you say, looking back, that you were fast enough, or did it take you a little bit to a few touches to the stove before you really knew how hot it was?
So I think it was kind of a fact finding mission initially because the first thought process was, well, we know why everyone left because they weren't allowed to work unless you were a critical business. And even then, you needed less employees because of the limited capacity that we could have in our restaurants. And so I think our first move, like many others, was reactionary. And then beyond that, we said, hey, from a financial standpoint, we know that we have to raise employee base pay, which is something we've been very, very intentional with. And then on top of that, we offered employees benefits like full health benefits. And then on top of that, um, Matt, our co-founder, Matt Pickenen, he came up with this just pretty incredible benefit system that we started offering to our company locations, which was we're actually offering servers, bartenders, and kitchen staff that are hourly workers paid time off.
Hmm.
So they can accrue paid time off. There's a ratio there. Obviously, number of hours work equals a fractional hour, an hour here and there. And then they could cash it in pretty much whenever they wanted. But we kind of took more. I mean, that's some of the quantitative things that we did. Qualitatively, this is going to sound crazy. And I've said it over and over and over again, and I get crazy looks. We started talking to people.
Hmm.
And that was the differentiating factor of how we were able to retain employees. Our employee retention from going from 2021 to 2022, our turnover was down in our company units by 38%.
Wow.
And we may be the only full service brand on earth that had that because we started talking to people. We were just very, very pragmatic with our approach. Certainly, money always plays a role in it, as it should. Everyone has bills to pay. We understand that. But it was, okay, you can't find a babysitter or you can't afford daycare, but, 3 days a week. So let's figure out how we can get you the hours you need in those 3 days. So we started being hyper flexible with all of our employees, and they stuck around, and it worked really well. I remember a particular incident where we had a person that we were employing that they had something go wrong with their car, and they were going to have to pick up a second job. It was like a $300 fix to their car, and they were talking about picking up a second job or a job that pays more or more hours. And I said, well, what if we just give you $300 to fix it? It's very practical.
Right.
Why would I train a new employee at an average cost of $2,300 to
Right.
potentially replace that person when I can take $300 out of my pocket and give it to that person and they'd be there the next day?
And
And so we just
how
took a very qualitative approach.
No, I love that, right? And I'm hearing that more and more from these conversations and writing the book is those that win are oftentimes those that create the spaces for feedback, right? And it seems so obvious. You kind of pointed out the lunacy of it. Just talk to your people,
That's
right?
right.
But there's a phenomenon within the hourly workforce that doesn't always happen, right? And I think that businesses shouldn't take for granted the fact that you should talk to your people and that it's easy. So from your experience, like what were some ways or advice you'd give to others of how to create that space to have conversations? And like tactically, are you telling your general managers to do it? Are you doing it yourself? Like dig into that a little bit more of like how to make that possible and happen.
I think meet them where they are is one of the most important things that you can do. I think there are plenty of, great tools out there. If you have 100 employees at, a massive restaurant or retail company or whatever it may be, that may be a little bit more difficult to do practically. And so I think there are a lot of digital tools out there that receive employee feedback and give them an opportunity to respond to things anonymously. But because of the way our system is set up and in our franchise locations and our company locations where we do have a smaller staff, I mean, 15 to 30 is not that large. We
Right.
know all of our employees' first and last names. We know their kids' names. We know all of those things.
Yeah.
So we essentially empowered our general managers to say, look, if you notice something's up, just pull them aside and say, let me give you a few minutes. Let's chat. Ask about their lives. I mean, it's more, there's far more of a human element, I think, to being a boss. But there's definitely a human element that has to take place in being a leader. And
Mm.
so we had those conversations, certainly, but a lot of it boiled down to our general managers. If you notice something, say something. Like let's work through this together and be very, very pragmatic in our approach to it.
Right. And what strikes me, especially with I don't want to overgeneralize groups of your size, but talking and knowing everybody's name and building a culture of inclusion is a little bit easier at 18 locations than 1800 locations, right? And I think the mastery, and one thing I'm really looking forward, because I'm assuming you're hoping to get to that growth, right?
Sure.
And hearing you speak and like on LinkedIn, I think that that's super clear, and I'm excited to follow along that journey. People being such an important part of that process, how do you think about scaling kind of that intimate feel, especially in a franchise system where you might be one arm's length away? In order to get that hyper growth, you kind of have to give your brand and your core values to people you might not know. How do you think about that?
That's the $1 billion question, right? I mean, so especially in a franchise system, it starts with essentially the recruitment process of folks who want to become franchisees.
Yeah.
It's the toughest thing that we do by far,
Mm.
because we have to look at that recruitment process as someone that, number one, it's a 10-year relationship between us and the franchisee. It's not just about how much money they have. It's not just about, whether or not they can write that check and sign that line. There are plenty of people that can do that, that can make that investment in opening the business. It's what kind of person is this? Do they have a proven track record of, leading, managing, being a general manager, being a multi-site manager, all of those things? And if they do, that's great. So they know the basics of things. They know how to write a schedule. They know how to do payroll. They know how to, do all the normal mechanical, what I would consider mechanical things of running a restaurant or running multiple restaurants. The differentiating factor is whether or not they can talk to others. In my opinion, that is the biggest differentiating factor between a good franchisee or a good franchise partner and a not so good one.
Right.
Or a great one, rather. Let's put it that way, a good and a great one. And so we are having those conversations on the front end and saying, go out to dinner with that person prior to them becoming a franchisee. How do they treat the wait staff? Are they making small conversation with people? What does it look like when you are one-on-one with that person? Are they saying all the right things? Are they being totally honest and talking about their shortcomings and ways in which they want to improve? And I think once you get them into your system, it is a constant reminder and an impartation of knowledge of what your culture is. And I have the culture discussion a lot. I think Shuckin Shack has a very unique culture, and we are who we say we are. We do what we say we're going to do. And for us, we just believe in being real with others, and we are very authentic in nature. That's something that we like to impart on all of our franchise partners coming in, and that cascades down through our system. And so that is the toughest thing that we do, but consistently, I will say that is one of the reasons we've been able to retain employees. Is because we know how to have those conversations. Because if you think about, going backwards from that, it's okay, our GMs can have conversations with the employees, can have this qualitative aspect and qualitative approach on building a great company culture. Well,
Yep.
let's rewind that. The franchisee and their GM have this open line of dialogue. They've learned how to build that culture. And then let's rewind that. The franchisee and the corporate or support center has a great dialogue in there. We've imparted that knowledge. We've talked about it consistently. Culture is a sum of parts. It is not something that is determined on paper and then dictated to the rest of your system. Culture is a sum of parts. And so you have to make sure that however you're, the summation of those parts is something that you have created and something that you bring into your own system. And it's almost a bleed through of exactly what's happening within your own system.
Yeah, and it's admirable to hear you talk about it, and clearly a passion piece for you, right? Is establishing and driving that culture, and ensuring that that's all in line as you grow the brand. Talk to me a little bit, because you do talk about high retention. You talk a lot about culture. What are some ways? Because I'm assuming you use your culture as a recruiting tool. What are some ways that you're able to do that effectively? Is it, the job description? Is it in the in-person interview? Is it the first 90 days? Like, what are some ways to quickly communicate it to those that are joining to ensure they stay those first 90 days? Because I mean, I don't know your retention metrics, but I know across the board, the first 90 days, of course, being critical.
That's
In
right.
that, if you are able to keep them for the first 90 days, the likelihood of them staying the next 90 days are really, really strong. And then the next 90 days, very, very, very strong. So, how do you communicate that culture, have it breathe through the organization in the recruiting process, and get the right people in the right seats?
I think you're very upfront. We are very upfront with it. And I can speak, personally from the corporate office and the employees that we bring on here. I tell everyone, and they look at me like I have 10 eyes when I say this. There's two things that I talk about in every interview. The first is I sit people down and I say, everyone that interviewed before you and everyone that interviews after you has the ability to do the job. We are here to talk about why we think you would be the best fit. Tell me about your life. Tell me about what your interests are. Tell me about the qualitative things that you value. Let's talk about schedule. Let's talk about work ethic. What are you not good at? And when
Yep.
I ask for strengths and weaknesses, everyone wants to give you BS, right? Like, the old interview technique that's been around for ages. I mean, I remember being taught this in, intro to business in high school, which
Yep.
was you always talk about your weakness and then turn it into a strength. I don't want
Right.
to hear that.
Right.
I actually want to hear, look, you know what? I think I'm great at creating this. I'm a qualitative thinker. I'm a right brain, but I cannot do math. That's
100%.
okay. That's okay. We will figure that out and we can coach you and we can teach you and we can work together on improving that quantitative side of you. I don't want to hear what weakness you can turn into a strength. And then the second thing is, so the first thing obviously being like everyone coming in can do this job. Now, how much of a cultural fit are you? And then the second thing is, which is a question that people are not often asked, I'll look them straight in the face and I'll say, you've seen the job description, you've read it. We obviously think that you could do the job and we're trying to determine whether you're a cultural fit, but tell me what you want to do.
Mm.
Tell me what you want to do. If every
What kind
job
of
paid
answers do
the,
you get? Are they
it's all over the
professional
board.
answers?
Most people have never been asked that question.
Yeah.
And so if every single job paid the exact same, what do you want to do? And so sometimes I get blank stares. Well, I don't know. I've never thought about that. And
Mm.
so that is really for me that's a stake to the heart of,
Yeah.
okay, look, if it's your goal one day to own your own restaurant, to build your own brand, we would love to have you because you get to learn brand building techniques right here. And it is my goal for you to leave here one day and pursue whatever it is that you want to pursue. Unless you want to stick around and we feel like it's a great cultural fit, then we can be, colleagues forever. And so tell me what you want to do and we're going to help you get to that goal. And when you can impart that trust and really create that connection with an incoming employee, it turns them from a number into someone that fully trusts in your system and the direction that you're taking things.
Yeah, because what's just so fascinating to me about those two lines of questions is it goes back to the way that you initially described the whole brand and the culture, which is authenticity. right? So if somebody gives you a BS or a gaslight answer on what are your weaknesses and they're not authentic, you see right through it. The same thing
No
with what you
question.
want to do. That's a very vulnerable, I don't want to say vulnerable because I don't know if
It
that's
is
the right word,
vulnerable.
but yeah, a vulnerable question, right? And so I feel that coming even from the interview process that sets the tone for the rest of their time here or at your company to get employment and to stay there because you follow through and you live by it. So how do you because I get that at the corporate office and you again, a question of scale, you're able to do that. You're able to kind of be that BS detector. You're able to sit in, spend time and all these things. How do you encourage that sort of mindset at the ground level of somebody who comes in to be a dishwasher? Is
Sure.
it interview guides? Is it training? Like, how do you think of that to make sure that everyone from the C-suite to the part timer embody those sort of culture points?
It's both. I mean, I think it's interview structure. I think you have to ask questions that are specifically germane for the quality of person that you're looking for, not the job description. I think that's
Mm,
critically important. I think when people, certainly there are jobs, dishwasher for the example.
yep.
Not it's very rare that you find a career dishwasher. And so that it's a time limited opportunity. That person, especially in the restaurant industry, will probably be with you, I don't know, 3 months to a year, but it's not their goal to be soaking wet in dish particles for the rest
Yep.
of their life. It's so very rarely someone's goal to do exactly that. And so I think creating a path for folks and asking in that qualitative question. And then when you're talking about scaling your business, especially with multi-unit leadership, when you're bringing on franchisees, whomever it may be, now we're not conducting the interviews for them, but we can do some interview coaching and saying, think really long and hard about what this person's life looks like. They're a dishwasher. Now, what questions should we ask surrounding that? It shouldn't be, do you know how to use a sprayer? Those are mechanical things that we can teach. Those are mechanical things. We can teach the difference between wash, rinse, and sanitize.
Right.
Mechanically speaking, that's pretty damn easy. But what we should be asking is, there's a reason you applied for this job. If it's just for the paycheck, totally understand it. We can make that happen. But
Yep.
what is the actual reason you applied for this job? Clearly, the restaurant industry is difficult. This is a hard job. Do you want to move up? Is that the path that you're looking for? Do you want to go from dish to fry to grill to expo to management? And really having those conversations very early on and creating a path for folks. Now, not everyone is going to follow that path. And you will get a lot of the time, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, people that say, look, I just need a job to pay the bills. I want to be able
Yep.
to clock in, put in my 40 hours a week, and I want to be able to clock out and go home and not be reachable. And that is
Yep.
totally fine. That is totally acceptable. And it's admirable in many, many different ways. But I think creating a path for folks and then talking about that with your franchisees and with your general managers and giving them the opportunity to think a little bit outside of the box whenever they're bringing people into their system.
Yeah, and I agree because I talk about this in the book, but not all turnover is necessarily bad, right? And there are people who come in, and if you're forthright and they are as well in their intentions, and they say, "Hey, I'm here for college. I just want to wash dishes, do my time, and get out." And if you're upfront with that, it could be an amazing opportunity for them and for you as the employer. But what I think I've matured to understand and appreciate in this process and just in my career is people just don't like it when it's a surprise, right? So they don't like it if after 6 months and a day, they didn't thinking they were going to stay for 6 years, they quit, right? Because then there's no planning or succession or organizationally to fill the gap. Because then, as you know, being in restaurants, and I know as well, then it's a fire sale. Then there's a fire. So all of a sudden, the kitchen staff has to do dishes, and then the servers have to hop in, and it's just really stressful for everyone. When you think about, again, scaling your business, ensuring that everybody is on the same page, what are some of your next, let's say, year to 2 years milestones that you're looking to hit? Is it unit growth? Is it better unit economics? What are you concerned about right now in the market?
It's both. I mean, I think that we so rarely assign numbers to things. I can't remember the last time we talked about the number of units that we want to be at by X
Yep.
year. We want to open healthy restaurants with good people,
Mm,
because when we believe that what our ultimate goal is, it all revolves around that.
right.
You can't build a house in sand. You have to open healthy restaurants with good people. And I think good people also hire good people. And so for us, we're building a system where we want to improve our unit level economics. We want to grow our average unit volume every year, and we want to add a couple of units here and there. Could we scale faster? Sure, we absolutely could. We have turned down dozens of people from coming in and becoming franchisees in our system because we just didn't think they would be a great fit. They might be a great fit of another brand, but our brand in particular, which is built on authenticity, which is built on this very qualitative thing, it's a tougher thing to do. It is a tougher thing to do. Make no
Okay.
mistake, we are taking the long road, but we are equipped to take the long road because we want to build healthy restaurants with good people.
And are you thinking geographically? Like where, let's say the next three Shuckin Shacks, where are they going to be in the country?
Yeah, I mean, we're primarily on the East Coast, and so we're in North and South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Maryland. We have one Chicagoland area
Okay.
location, but primarily speaking, we're looking at the East Coast. But if there are folks throughout, primarily east of the Mississippi, that are interested in becoming franchisees, again, healthy restaurants with good people. If you're a good person and you want to
Yeah.
open a restaurant, a full service restaurant with full bar, then it may be a good fit for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and just to wrap things up, again, we really appreciate your time. If somebody wants to learn more about Shuckin Shack, about maybe getting a job with you all, to potentially open a location, to follow you in your journey, what's the best way to do that?
Easiest thing is go to our website, theshuckinshack.com. You can find everything about our menu. You can find a little careers tab on there, and you can find a franchising tab there as well.
All right. Wonderful. Well, I think that does it for today, unless you had anything else you'd like to say to our audience. You've been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome.